So today I'm going to show you how our VM series of locators work. I'm going to show you how to get them up and running, actually connect to a utility, and go and do a locate. I'm also going to show you the standalone A-frame, the VM510 A-frame, and I'm going to show you how it also does a fault find with that standalone A-frame. So let's get into it now. So the first thing we're going to talk about here, this happens to be our VM550 utility locator. This is a great utility locator for someone that's doing checks before localized digging, landscape contractor, someone that wants to make sure there's no utilities that are buried close to where they're digging in flower beds and such, or doing private locates, stuff behind the house that the homeowner owns. So again, a really good locate set, comes in a nice compact bag like this, fits easily behind a truck seat, in the back seat of a vehicle, so very easy to store away, lightweight, and quite simple to use. So the first thing we're going to have to do is open up the back. We remove these two screws here on the transmitter. We take our batteries, and it shows you on the side here the direction of the batteries, which way they go. It'll take 4 D-cell batteries in the transmitter. Give it a shake. And our cap goes on. There's a little tab here and a tab on this side. And we just simply line up the tabs, and that's how that's going to screw back together. Now on the receiver part, the wand, if you will, basically unscrew the cap. And this uses 2 AA batteries that fit into a little battery pack like this. Pop them in. And when we look at the back of our receiver, it says plus and negative. So we just simply line that up on our battery here. And you want to make sure that this goes in the correct way as well, obviously contacts down. So we'll simply screw the cap back on. And there we go, we're ready to operate these. Now inside our bag of our transmitter, on the inside pouch here, there will be a set of direct connection leads with a ground stake as well. And for this test of this utility locator, I'm going to actually be using our accessory 5-inch clamp to ring clamp around a hydro service and locate that out for us. Okay, so here we are at our hydrometer. And I've got my 550 transmitter here. And what I'm going to use to do this locate right now is our ring clamp. So this is an accessory that you buy. This is a 5-inch ring clamp here. And so what we do is we open up the back port of our transmitter. Take our lead from our clamp. We're going to clamp around the stack of our meter. And then on our transmitter here, quite simple controls. So simply the power button here turns it on. Now we can turn the volume down by this button right here. And we can change our frequency. We can change our frequency here by simply pushing the F button. So what I'm going to use to do this is I'm going to try 8 kilohertz. And we're going to see how that works for us. We have a choice of 3. We have 5, 12, 8, and 83. And then our other frequency here, our fourth one, is fault find, which we'll talk about in a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and try 8K and see how this goes. So on comes our receiver. I just turned the volume off there. So a long press of the power button will turn it off and on. A short press will adjust our volume off and on. Now I can bring my gain down. Now I'm already in 8 kilohertz, but if I needed to change that, I would simply push and hold my information button here, and then I can scroll through my frequencies, and I've got 60 hertz, 512, 8.19, and 83. So I'm going to go on 8.19, push my menu button again, and I'm back at the main screen. So now we simply just begin our locate. I'll turn the volume back on my receiver. So what I'm going to do here now to start my locate is I'm going to do a sweep around in this area and see what I can find in order to begin my locate. So I'm going to turn my gain up a bit by simply pushing the plus button up once, and that will max out my gain. So as you can see, I'm off scale here. So I'll simply just bump it down a little bit. Okay, so when I come across, I've basically got something here. So now I've found my locate. So you can see the pipe comes in this direction. So here we are right here. I can rotate the receiver to find my highest signal, which is this direction. I can place the receiver on the ground, take a depth reading, 3 foot 9 inches, raise it up a foot, changes to 4 foot 9. So that's a good confirmable depth. So I know that what I'm clamped around, this should be what I'm locating. So we'll carry on and do our locate now. So here we are tracing this utility out. So here it is right here. Lower my gain down a bit. I'm going to check my direction. It drops off, comes back up, drops off, comes back up. Take a depth reading, 5 foot 3 inches, raise it up a foot, 6 foot 1 inch. So again, confirmable depth, and this should be what I'm clamped around, and this should be what I'm trying to locate. Let's keep following. So here we are, walked us right over to this power pole, which definitely makes sense that this is our service feeding this power meter over here. So we were easily and accurately able to locate out this power service. We can carry on with whatever we were doing here on this job. Now let's go ahead and we're going to try doing that with the direct connection leads instead of the signal clamp. So I'm going to take my leads and my ground stake, and I'm going to use these instead of using my signal clamp. So quite simply what we do here to start off with is we will unwrap our leads, plug into my transmitter, now I will separate the two. I'll take my red lead and I'll actually clip to the meter base. And I'll now take my black lead and put my ground stake in the ground over at a 90-degree angle and over in the actual dirt. As you can see, we still have some snow here. The ground is a little bit frozen, but I was able to push it in a ways. Now I've got a good ground connection. So back here with my transmitter, I turned it back on again. So again, I'm going to switch my frequency, and I'm going to change it to 8 kilohertz again. So we also have the option here, if I didn't think I was getting a good connection or I didn't have a good signal, we can push this other button here, which simply gives us more output. So it just increases the amount of output that this is actually putting out, the current that it's putting on the line. But I'm going to go back to the regular setting, which is basically just low current. Now I'm going to do my sweep again, and obviously when I come across my ground stake here that is in the ground, I'm going to obviously pick that up. But just carry on with your sweep and go all the way around. Now obviously we've already located this, and we have a good idea by seeing the pole out that direction that this is going to be fed that way. So what I'll do is I'll just start my sweep from here and walk in that direction. So here we are here. Let's confirm our direction. So it's running in this direction. Let's take a depth reading. 2 foot 6 inches, relatively close to what we had before. I'll raise it up a foot. Changes to 3 feet. So it's changing pretty well. So this should be what we actually want to locate. Okay, so here we are again. Found my highest signal right here. Put the receiver on the ground. Now my gain's a bit high, so I'm just going to bump that down a little bit by pushing the minus button. I'm going to take a depth reading, 4 foot 4 inches. I'm going to raise it up, 4 foot 7. So there's a little bit of distortion here, and I can hear a little warble on the line, but that's quite fine. And the reason why that is, we had better connection on it with the ring clamp because we're actually clamped around the conductor that we're trying to light up. By clipping to the meter base, we're putting signal out on our bell, we're putting signal out all through the house, and on any other utility that may be bonded to that hydro panel or to the ground system, the ground grid from our actual power. But that's okay, let's continue tracing this out. So again, you can see that it has walked me right here to the power pole again. Easily, quickly, I was able to do this locate and get my job done with the simple VM550 utility locator. So now let's talk about the VM510 standalone A-frame and utility locator. So it comes in a nice carrying bag as well. We take that out of the bag. Here's our A-frame. Now these little rubber ends on here are simply just to protect the bag and to protect from poking into things. So make sure you take those off before you start doing a A-frame fault find. So in the bag, or either in the back of the A-frame here, you will have a battery holder. This holds 6 AA batteries. We'll simply go ahead and install the batteries. There we go, in the pack. Okay. Unscrew the cap on the back of the A-frame. And you'll notice as you look in, there are 2 contacts on the inside at the bottom and simply 2 contacts here. So we just basically take this battery pack, put it in the A-frame as such, put our cap back on, and you're ready to go do a locator or an A-frame fault find. So now let's talk about the VM510 A-frame, standalone A-frame fault locator. So what we can also do with this VM510 is we can also use this to do a locate. Power on the unit by pushing the power button. So I'm going to push and hold the M button, and then I'm in my mode screen. My enter button becomes a quick push to change the actual features. So now what I've changed this to, it says PN, which is peak null, which is my locate mode, instead of FF, which is fault find. So now if I go down to my frequency and do a quick press of the frequency button, what my options are is 8K fault find and FF. So 8K fault find will allow us to also locate in 8K. So that's what I've got it set to now. I've got it set to peak and null, 8K fault find. I'm going to push my mode button to get back out to the main screen. This is my display. So this little center bar on screen here is essentially where my utility is, and I want it to be centered in between those 2 arrows. So we've already got our transmitter hooked up to our utility, so let's go through and try to do a locate on this. So what we have here with our A-frame utility locator is in the center, we have no sound, and as I go off to one side we have a beep, and as I go off to the other we have a solid tone. So essentially I just wave that back and forth and we can go and do that. Now my leads on the bottom here have nothing to do with my actual locate. What I'm using is the coils inside of here to pick up that signal. So you can see it's walking me right over to this power pole again. So even using the VM510 A-frame, we're able to locate out this utility. But now let's go ahead and simulate a fault to show you how this thing operates in fault find mode. Okay, so now I've got my transmitter turned to fault find mode. So I'm simply going to push and hold my M button again on my first screen here. And I'm going to make sure that I'm in fault find mode, and I'm going to make sure my frequency is in 8K fault find. Push the M button to get back out. And now what I'm going to see on screen is I'm going to start to see an arrow in this bottom corner. So what we do to begin our fault find is we'd be hooked up to the utility that's faulted. We'd completely isolate that utility. So that means no matter what, whether it's a power service, we're going to locate all the neutrals and the actual hot cables. All of it needs to be disconnected in order for us to do this. And the reason is what we're doing is we're pumping current out here on that actual conductor, and wherever it hits the actual dirt is where we're going to find it's going to create a pool of current in the ground, and that's where we're going to find it. So we want this to walk us to that pool of current. Now if we have other grounds connected, the problem that may happen is it may walk us to those other grounds. And as a matter of fact, that's actually what I've simulated here in this situation that you'll see coming up. So the first thing we want to do to start our actual fault locate is we want to think of, okay, how deep is this utility going to be? And typically if you're doing a fault locate, you probably have that information. And what we want to do is we want to take the A-frame and place it roughly that distance away from our ground stake. So I think where this ends up is about 4 feet deep. So I'm going to come away from my ground stake and I'm going to hold this down and I'm going to take a reference on screen. Let me bring you in and show you what I mean. So here we are on screen. I've got the receiver held down. I've got my arrow pointing away from my ground stake, which is a very good thing. And you can see on screen that the number says 80. So what I'm looking for is when I get close to my actual fault, I'm looking for a number that is relatively close to that. And all I'm simply going to do from here is just place the A-frame on the ground, sticking it in the dirt, and I'm just going to follow that arrow until it tells me to walk backwards. I'll show you how that goes now. We can also do this on asphalt. So here the asphalt is actually a little bit wet. So when I place this on the ground, as a matter of fact, I'm actually getting a higher reading now because wherever I'm stuck right now, I have a little bit better of a contact. So now instead of saying 80, I'm actually 103. The arrow is pointing away from me. So doing a fault locate, we don't actually have to be over top of the cable. And because for a majority of this cable, it actually runs in the asphalt, what I would do in this situation is come over to the grass and follow it along until, let's say there was a break in the middle of the asphalt. I'm simply going to follow this along. If the arrow points me backwards, I'm going to find that location back and forth this way, and I'm going to simply turn in this direction and then walk out in the driveway. Now I have a path this direction that I know that that break probably is. So I'm going to wet potentially the asphalt down if I couldn't lean on this and get a reading on my actual A-frame, which in this situation I'm not. It's just simply too dry. So what I would do is I would wet the asphalt down or wait till it's a rainy day. But that's how we would locate this fault out. So what I'm going to do now is place my A-frame in the ground. Wait a second, and the arrow points me ahead. I'm just going to start walking. Place the A-frame in the ground again, and the arrow points me ahead. So I'll place my A-frame in the ground. Look at my arrows. My arrows are pointing ahead. So I simply move ahead, place the A-frame in the ground, and the arrows point me ahead. Now I put the A-frame in the ground. I'm going to wait a second, still pointing ahead. Make sure we've got a good connection. And now my arrow is actually pointing me backwards. So I'm going to come back a bit. So what I've got now is my arrow reversing right here. So now I'm going to take the A-frame and go in this direction. And the difficulty here is because our ground is frozen still, it's tough to get a good connection in here because what we're trying to do is have continuity here to the soil. So obviously if it was wetter out, it'd be a little bit better. If this was not as frozen, it would be a little bit better for us. So I may have to push down a little bit harder on this. Come over here to this soil where it's a bit better than this ice. So now it's pointing me again. So I knew I was over that way. So I'm going to go forward, pointing me forward. Still pointing me forward. So the A-frame has actually walked me over here to this bell surface. So what I had said about simulating a fault here, what I've done by clipping on that meter, because there is a bond strap, a ground strap from the telecommunication service, that runs out through the telecommunication service and actually comes back to here, that's the strongest ground. So it's walked me to the ground of this actual pedestal. So what I did, basically just holding the A-frame on the ground, the arrow points me forward. When I go past it, and you think about the center of this A-frame is where that arrow is going to be. So as I go past it tells me to back up. So I know that this is going to be my ground. I can then go this direction, basically create a cross, go forward, go forward. Now it's telling me to back up, which means that obviously, and I mean we know this because the pedestal is here, but if this was buried and underneath the ground, it would be telling me that my fault is right here. Then what I would do is the last step is I would take the front of my A-frame, the front leg, the green leg, stick it at the point of those crosshairs where they actually crossed. I would do a circle and placing this A-frame in the ground and rotating it around. And that's going to create a hole where I'm actually going to know that the fault is right there. Now if you were to go ahead and dig that up, you'd find that's there. Now I know in this situation again that I'm just picking up the ground from this actual bell service. So there we were able to quickly and easily, again with the VM510 fault locator, to find a fault. We were able to locate with the VM550, find any utilities that may be in the area, hook up to our fault, and come out and actually trace that fault and do the fault locate. Please reach out to your local distributor and they'd be more than happy to come out and show you how this works live and in person. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of information videos and training videos on this channel for you, and we'll be coming out with lots more in the future. Thanks and take care.